Hi, I'm Professor Georgina Blakeley and I'm joined by my co-author today, Professor Brendan Evans. And we're here to talk to you about our new book. It's a revised edition of a book which was first published in 2013, The Regeneration of East Manchester, A Political Analysis. And it's come out today. But Brendan, I think you're going to talk first about why we did the book in the first place.
Yep. Well, of course, at that time, 2002, we're talking about, there was an international emphasis on area-based initiatives to regenerate local economies and to improve social inclusion. And of course, the New East Manchester project was a particularly prime example and very characteristic of New Labour. And so we thought it was a good test bed of both area-based initiatives and of New Labour policy. It was one of many initiatives that New Labour undertook. We won't go into all of them, such as the New Deal for Communities and the New East Manchester Urban Regeneration Companies. So there was a lot going on, and we thought this was something well worth examining.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because as academics or researchers, we rarely get that chance to go back and see what's happened in an area that we've perhaps researched before. But for us, it was really important to go back because even in this first edition of the book, we discussed the long-term nature of the regeneration of East Manchester. So if you remember, interviewees talked about it being a 20-year, a 30-year process. I think we'd probably go even further now and say that regeneration is this ongoing process. It's not a one-off activity. So we wanted to go back and see what had changed, what had stayed the same, what had continued. And we were particularly interested in seeing the impact of key events like the 2008 economic crash and subsequent austerity.
Yes, and of course there were many other events in the period from 2012 to the present day. Brexit referendum in 2016, for example, the emergence of COVID, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, the shiny new authority, was changing the focus on politics in Manchester, and of course many prime ministerial changes.
And don't forget the election of Andy Burnham as the first Metro Mayor of Greater Manchester.
Very good point, yes.
So unsurprisingly, when we went back, we found both continuity and change, and that's what the new chapter of this revised edition of the book really focuses on. I think if I had to choose, I'd say the main point of continuity is the activism of Manchester City Council as the key player in the area, and its ongoing commitment to regeneration. Even if the focus of regeneration has undoubtedly shifted, I think it's fair to say that there's still an ongoing commitment to social policies of some form or another, whether that's social housing or whether that's paying attention to areas that were perhaps neglected in the past, like Holt Town, Greymare Lane. And of course, there's still that kind of provision of new educational facilities, such as Connell College.
Yep, but of course after 2012 there was something of a lull. There was, I feared, almost a disappearance of the whole project. In fact, that didn't happen, and indeed during the course of the research for this particular book, when we, for example, looked at the minutes of Manchester City Council, there were many, many references back to New East Manchester, many attempts to pick up some of those initiatives for completion, as you said, with Greymare Lane and so on. And I think that shows that there's not been an amnesia about the whole project in the area or on the City Council.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would say that a key change is much greater emphasis on economic growth and much less attention paid to those social issues that I mentioned. So whilst we can still see area-based initiatives, not just in Manchester that are still ongoing, but also in the kind of the wider Greater Manchester area. So initiatives like Atom Valley, Old Trafford, these initiatives have a narrower economic focus, and I think what's gone is that focus on community and the involvement of citizens, which we saw with New Deal for Communities. So they had neighbourhood planning, they had those community fun days, they had like pie and pea suppers where they got residents really involved in the process. And I think that resident involvement is the kind of the first casualty of austerity.
I think we saw ourselves the resident involvement and how substantial and genuine it was, and that's one of the losses, I think. Another significant change, perhaps one of the most significant changes since 2012, has been the renewed emphasis on the suburbs of Ancoats and New Islington. They figure quite substantially in the book, in the first book, but there's been a real emphasis on that since 2012, and I think this is influenced to some extent by the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, which is very concerned to make Manchester city centre a big centre for retail, for entertainment, and for commercial activities. And so I think that because of that, there's been this great shift to the city centre moving eastwards rather than focusing centrally on East Manchester districts themselves. So I think that that eastward shift is now probably the prime example of the continuing regeneration, but there are many other examples, of course, we discuss in the book.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example of kind of how change and continuity become intertwined. And I think another example of that is the ongoing importance of partnerships. If you remember when we kind of re-interviewed Sir Richard Leese as part of the kind of the new edition of this book, he said partnership working was more important than ever. And I think that's true, but it's also the case that who the partners are has changed significantly. So gone are those kind of state partners, whether that's the North West Development Agency, whether it's English Partnerships, New Deal for Communities. They're gone, and they've been replaced by an increasing importance of partnerships with private property developers. And perhaps the key example of that is the relationship between Manchester City Council and the Abu Dhabi United Group. So you could argue, though, of course, that was a necessity. You know, as public funds dried up through austerity and the state shrank, the importance of those private property developers became crucial to any ongoing regeneration activity.
Although that big initiative sits alongside a number of smaller initiatives that are still continuing, which you referred to earlier. So I think, where does all this leave us, really? I mean, after all this research, after this revisiting the area, I think one conclusion that stands out as far as I'm concerned is that time-bound, area-based initiatives have their place. The time-bound bits should go, probably, because we're seeing that they're now permanent. But if they continue, they need to sit alongside, clearly, wider local and national policies to address economic growth and to address the problems of social exclusion.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. My key takeaway would be, as you said, that regeneration is not time-bound, that it's this ongoing activity. But for me, what's crucial is that leadership of local government to keep driving the process, even when conditions are negative.
Yeah, but of course the continuing support of national government is also necessary, or where it's withdrawn, it's all the more important that local authority remains active in this area.
Yeah, so to finish with a cheesy ending, to find out more, buy the revised edition.